Commission, which essentially was set up by, it was when the sealing wasn't quite a union yet, but still people were beginning, you know, the fishermen were starting to develop a voice, and people were starting to say, wait a minute, something terribly wrong here. So the sealing inquiry had one result, and the judicial inquiry, sponsored by the government of Newfoundland, which was then, of course, British, it was a British colony, had quite another finding. So the result, the sealing commission blamed Abram Cain, and the official commission, the judicial commission, which was essentially British, exonerated him and then gave him an order of the British Empire. So, and it became OBE immediately. And for good reason. I mean, from that point of view, I mean, everything is complex, nothing is simple. But the OBE was because he supplied the seal oil that year, which, because the hunt was very late, that eventually allowed the repeated operation of the Gatling gun.
World War I.
World War I, the change that really, you know, slowed the Germans down. The Germans were not nice, as we know, and Captain. So, in a sense, we're dealing with the lesser of two evils when you're dealing with Captain Abram Cain, because he did contribute enough of that seal oil. The seal oil essentially is like the hides of the white coat. The white coats look this big, you know, this sort of that height, and the fat is about 4 inches of fat beneath this, between the skin and the carcass, and that's what they were hunting. It's that fat well, it's a very high viscosity oil, so it has a really high heat. It'll take heat and friction to an extremely high degree, so that was critical in keeping rapid-fire weapons going, and the works of rifles, and sewing machines, the work on sewing machines to make the uniforms during the war. The leather the seal leather was used for belts of boots, because there's nothing like seal skin for boots, etc., etc., etc. So it's not a frivolous undertaking in the way we might think of it now. It had a critical economic force. And back to the men, the 1900 men who would get berths, and literally that was a berth on the ship. That might be pulled from, you know, maybe as many as 30 to 40,000 fishermen looking for 1900 places. So you can imagine once you got there, it sheds a whole different kind of light on Levi, for example. When you get a berth with Captain Cain, it's like it's inherited almost. The whole system goes on for as long as you have family and sons that are up to the job.
Why was the seal hunt like that and not the regular fishing? Was it owned by somebody else, not the same merchants?
No, the difference was purely economic, in the sense that the job was extraordinarily risky.
Okay.
And the men had no control. Like, you have a good deal of control over your own fishery, despite the fact that you're in debt. But when you went out on the seal hunt, there was no guarantee you're going to come back.
Okay.
So there was, to that degree, there was a bit of conscience in the merchant class, that they recognized the danger. There's a huge amount of money made, huge amounts. So 150 men per boat on 12 boats, 150 men at $70 is still not a lot of money, you know, when they'd be making thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
Questions, comments? Seize the day.
So when did you first discover this incident?
I first came across it in about, I think, grade 9 or 10.
Okay.
I think there was a book published by Cassie Brown called Death on the Ice, and in the early 70s, and she essentially had gone to the archives as well and found material that I eventually found, you know, 20 years later. And her book was very really instrumental in the thinking of a lot of Atlantic Canadians. I don't know how far it reached, but it's in the, you know, the documentation of this event, which is extraordinary. It's an extraordinary event. It didn't go. It never traveled as far as it might have. There were many attempts at it. There were 3 attempts at Hollywood films on this event, on this same material, and one of them got as far as Montreal. One got as far as Newfoundland, and I don't think the other one even left. Because it's just so hard to shoot. It's virtually impossible to put on film. Because what we're dealing with is not like a frozen lake in northern Ontario. We're dealing with pans of ice the size of this building that are going like this, and men surviving and working and just dying, but mostly flourishing. Mostly flourishing. The seal hunt was dangerous, but it wasn't deadly by any means. So the story itself, I thought the story was bigger than where it should be spread farther. So, and that's what prompted me to do that. Then when Donna commissioned me to investigate it, I went back to the archives. Went back to like Arthur Moe. They're all fictionalized, right? And the play arises essentially not from the transcripts, because the transcripts of what the men said on onion skin through 3 generations of carbon. That's all that's left with typewriters from 1914. Very difficult to read.
The commission reports.
These were the commissioner, the reports of both of the commissions of inquiry. And these men all knew each other. They grew up together. They were from the same communities, and they had very common interests. There's clearly the Catholic-Protestant split, but there's also some rivalries by people from St. John's, townies, to people from around the Bayman. Neither group was entirely comfortable with each other, but still, it was enough to get along. But when you read the transcripts, and what this play arises from is not the transcripts, but what's not said. Because these men have loyalties to each other. They're not going to betray a confidence. They're not going to talk about people, their neighbors or friends or family members behaving badly in bad circumstances. But it's amazing that when you look at a set of transcripts like that, where you're trying to get the truth, and you begin to feel what's not said start to emerge, and that's where the play existed. And it's a fictionalized version of what one would imagine was not spoken. But for example, with Levi Templeman, it's fictionalized, of course. He's from Little Catalina. The family's from Little Catalina, which is just up from Trinity Bay, from the theater where the play premiered. And so I had to be really careful, because I changed the names, just out of respect for the descendants, because certain things happen in the Templeman family, which are not they're not flattering. Shall we say, are not probably part of the family's narrative. So those things become altered.